Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Hey, everybody. My name is Vanessa Blaze, and I'm the Director of Policy and Planning here at the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I'm here today with Nicole Sheaff. She is a parent of children who have disabilities, and she's also a 2022 graduate of the New Hampshire Leadership Series. And she's here today to talk a little bit about her experiences being a parent and also inviting others to share their experiences and to be support for each other when they're navigating the systems, especially in the school systems. So go ahead, Nicole.
So thank you, Vanessa, for inviting me to do this. So I am a mother of 4 children that are all diagnosed with various developmental, learning, and mental health needs. I have a professional background in healthcare and also in special ed settings. So when I became involved in the special ed process, I felt like I had a step up in that I had a medical background and I knew how to write goals, and it was still all new to me, and I had to do a lot of research. So I have felt for 17 years, because my oldest is now 21, I have an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old, that having children diagnosed with various disabilities has really isolated our family. We really felt isolated in the community, within the school, just because my kids were never successful with sports or extracurricular activities. Many of them had one-on-ones, so that made it very difficult for them to be successful in a lot of areas, both in school and also within the community. So that isolation, I would say, was our biggest challenge over these past 17 years. Both my sons were identified for IEPs at early ages, like right when they were 3. So coming out of early intervention and being identified for an IEP. And during that time, even though they did qualify for developmental preschools, the developmental preschool was not a full-time placement. It was a couple days a week, a few hours. So we did require, because both my husband and I worked full-time, private preschools. And unfortunately, both of my boys at different times were asked to leave their private preschool. So in turn, my husband had to quit his job and stay home with my kids, my boys, because there wasn't anything to fill the gap. They needed the services from the school, yet there wasn't anything. The private schools just didn't feel like they had the support or the ability to provide service, what my boys needed at that time. So my husband stayed home, and then we did do some neuropsych testing on both of our boys. We brought them down to Boston when my second son was about kindergarten, first grade, and I think my oldest one was about first grade, second grade. And they did receive diagnosis, but one thing that really impacted kind of us over the years was that my second son, although he had a lot of symptoms and met a lot of criteria of a neurodevelopmental disorder, such as like autism, the doctors felt that he was almost too social. So he didn't get that diagnosis. And there's sometimes you're happy that you don't get a diagnosis, and sometimes you're not happy. And I think parents struggle with the importance of a diagnosis. What does it really mean? And so instead of a formal diagnosis, he just received a multitude of language disorder, sensory processing disorder, ADHD, cognitive delays, learning disabilities, all independently. And what kind of came of that was, over the years, we found that because he never had a formal diagnosis of a neurodevelopmental disorder, he didn't qualify for any services. So that really impacted my second son's progress, I think, through school, and now he's 18, so he's an adult. So we found out that quickly that private insurance would not cover a language disorder for speech therapy because it was a disorder. It was not considered an acute condition, so it was not covered. So we really had to rely on school-based services for most of his supports. And a lot of insurances wouldn't cover services, so we had to privately pay out of pocket for short terms because due to financial need, you can't pay $260 a session for very long. So that was another thing that kind of got in our way. So eventually, over the years of working with the school and my children's disabilities, I ended up taking them off my private insurance and actually putting them on state insurance because I found that I was able to access more services that way. However, at the same time, not a lot of providers take more of a state-based insurance. So my second son does qualify for medical-based Medicaid. So I was able to get him access for that. But it was interesting to see kind of that struggle between private insurance and then Medicaid, and being a professional and a working parent, kind of struggling internally with taking state assistance that way too, was difficult. So the boys didn't receive any outside services. When my second son started kindergarten, he did qualify for a full day kindergarten through the school to receive all his services, but the staff really felt like he wasn't ready. And that's kind of where my advocacy really kicked in high gear. I had to prove why he needed the services. I needed to prove why he needed a full day. I had to prove everything. So that's when I discovered the Parent Information Center and received my kind of handbook on all the special ed rules and regulations and started reading and tagging. And I sat at every single meeting and started quoting off laws and rules and hired an advocate for a short term, and really kind of became my boys' case manager and advocate very strongly because no one else was going to do it. No one else had that intensity, and I think because I am a provider too, I felt like I needed to look in every area to get my children the support and the resources they needed and they deserved. So I had mentioned I have 4 kids. I do have 2 daughters, and they didn't receive their IEPs until about first grade. And through all their experiences, I've been the one, along with my husband, reading the IEP goals, reading over the evaluations, lining things, underlining things, marking things, putting comments, questions, doing research on various techniques that are out there, just so I can make sure that my kids are getting the best services they need. And like I said, because we have to solely depend on school services based on insurance, we didn't have that availability to do a lot of outpatient work. And also on a 1-income salary because my husband had left his job to stay home with my children. So just really experiencing, finding things and finding resources on my own. We did, like I mentioned, access Parent Information Center. I have needed to contact the Department of Education to find out kind of the rules for what due process is, what mediation is, like how I need to find information about seclusion and restraint, contacting Disability Rights Center. We had contacted a lot and had access to various community mental health agencies and our area agencies. And these are things that I just, as a parent, found. I had to research on my own. I had to find on my own. We have had many case managers over the years, but I feel like because everybody's understaffed and underfunded. I really feel like parents, for me at least, need to do a lot on their own, and it's very overwhelming. So I think we found as a family that we were in desperate need of respite, desperate need of home supports. We could never find babysitters that had the skill that would take the amount of money that we could afford to pay. So we did have access to respite money, but never actually used it because of the pay and the skill level we needed. We just were never able to find anybody. And my children were sometimes in constant states of crisis at school. So I would be at work and I would be getting phone calls, and, my husband started his own business at home. But because I was the medical provider and kind of that expert and that case manager, like I was the one that was contacted. I needed to go, I needed to pick them up, I needed to have a meeting, I needed to be there for everything. And that really impacted my reliability with work, like how often I could get to work and do what, I kind of put myself in my career. So again, that lack of diagnosis really impeded my children's ability to access services. They had the level of need there, but because the diagnosis wasn't there, they would qualify for like conditional involvement with the area agencies. And even my daughter, as she became older, I had applied several times for our area agency for her, and she was declined because it was perceived that her needs were more mental health related. And I eventually spoke to supervisors, and they sent her for a clinical review, and she did qualify. So again, it's required me to be the push and be that squeaky wheel to get my children what they needed. And that was pretty exhausting for me. When my daughter eventually required residential, and the school was adamant they were not going to provide that, I had to really do my research, contact various state departments, legislators, and was able to get a placement for her. But I think the school immediately was like, well, this is at that time was CHIN, so a child in need of services. And I think they felt that would be helpful. However, at the time, CHINs was related to then losing parent rights. So we didn't want to go that way. So I really had to work hard in talking to all these departments and to get her placed because we weren't able to keep her safe at home. She needed something. And she was there for a year. She's home and she's amazing now. So I'm so glad that is where we were able to get her. And so it's just been a lot, like I said, it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I found kind of my tribe. So after doing this for about 17 years on my own, really finding support groups on Facebook within the community, and really understanding that there isn't something wrong with our parenting. This is, our children have disabilities. We are learning how to manage them. They are great children. And just to have that support from others and to have that outlet to be like, I had a really tough day, and have people understand. Like, that was huge. And I wish I had that from the start because that made me feel our experience is more normalized, I guess. So we're still plugging away, but I do a lot of research on finding trainings myself. When my second son was going through transition, I researched every transition Zoom and in-service there might be out there, just so I could be on top of what I needed to lay out with the school, with services, what I needed to pursue for voc rehab, all those type of things. So it's been a long and very busy road. I eventually decided to stop working because the caregiver burnout was just so intense that it was affecting my physical and mental health. And because I kind of project manage 4 children, that's kind of was my second job, but now my full-time job. So, there's always an ebb and flow and a loss and a gain with everything. But I'd say that now I have a good idea of what resources are out there and what I need to, and they're in good spots. I'm kind of taking this advocacy to help other families know what's available and that you're not alone, and that you'll get through this as hard as it is, but just really relying on the supports of others and learning from others. So,
can you share a little bit about what you think the school system could be doing that would be more supporting of parents?
I think, the school, like I had mentioned before, I think everybody is short-staffed, and I think they are underfunded, and the teachers have a lot on their plate. I really feel that understanding and empathizing with families and knowing that families are doing the best they can, and if they are struggling, they need more support and more help. So instead of making families not necessarily an enemy, but I think when you have parents like me who are very intense and they're coming to the table with a list of kind of demands and saying, I need this, I want this, I want this, I think it's automatically, it's kind of antagonizing, I think, to them. And having schools and places understand that this is a defensive reaction, and families are really trying their best for their kids. It's not necessarily a parenting issue. It is that they need more. They need more help. They need respite. And really connecting with other families, I think, is helpful outside of school to make you feel more normal, if that is a thing. I think also having information, because I again, like I said before, I have a background in some of that special ed and healthcare, so I knew the rules. So a lot of families coming into this don't know that those goals need to be measurable, that those goals need to have specifics in there, and what the services are going to look like, and when the services are going to be provided. And I feel like educating some families more about the process would be really good for the school to do, and make it more of a team feeling, because the parents are the expert in their children. So the school is the expert in school, but at the same time, the parent is the expert of their child. So really making parents feel important and valued and heard, I think, will change the dynamic a lot with the school system. And helping find outside resources. It may not be funded by the school, but looking at community-based supports and really building in a sense of community. My children really were isolated either by their ability, their behavior, or they were placed out of district for several years. And what we discovered in those experiences is they didn't have friends. They were kind of seen as, oh, don't play with this child, or they were taken out of class, or the class was moved, or they were sent out of district an hour away. So they weren't in their home community. They didn't have the peers, they didn't have the resources and the connections, and that really impacted their mental health, like that feeling of inadequacy and their self-esteem, and really kind of developed mental health needs for them because of their lack of friendships. So I think making the school and the community be accountable for building those safe and integrated placements is crucial. I could never find a baseball league that my son could play in, or a camp even, because all the camps required one-on-ones, and we couldn't pay for a one-on-one or find a one-on-one. So then they missed out on the camp experience. So, it's just all those things that make kids that it was hard to find. They really relied on each other for friendships. So that, but also, I think not necessarily the school, but really looking at children based on their need and not necessarily by their diagnosis. And I had mentioned this before, is that my son did not qualify for a lot of services because he did not have a neurodevelopmental diagnosis. The interesting thing is, when he was 18, he received a neurodevelopmental diagnosis because I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. So he lost a lot of time, yet had the need. Same with my daughter. There was a need. Our family had a need. There was a level of intensity that was there, yet because one word wasn't there, there were no services or supports that could be provided. So I think that is something else to look at. For us, respite supports, having lists of providers, financial assistance, and even when I quit my job, I'm still working, but I'm not getting paid to be their case manager. So I think families that have the financial resources may be able to access more, but working middle class families are staying afloat, and there's not that extra money there to pay for thousands of dollars of a specific treatment. So just having those resources, having those financial resources, community resources, lists of providers. We've had to do a lot of research ourselves to find specific providers that might be skilled in a certain area. And we've had hospitals tell us, okay, you need to find a provider that's skilled in X, Y, and Z. Go ahead. Go find somebody. And that's really difficult. So parents and families that may not be as outgoing or understand the system as well, I'm struggling, and I felt like I know it. So families that are just starting or don't know kind of what they should expect, that's kind of where I really am trying to help right now too. But I would say for us, if we did eventually get home supports through the Fast Forward program, and that changed our lives because we had always been to different providers for all our kids working as individuals. And we've been given hundreds of suggestions, and use this task board and use this behavior chart and do this and that. And we've tried it all, and we could never quite get it to work for our family because we had 4 kids who are all different personalities, all different intellectual abilities, all different interests. So how can you manage 4 children and survive? We need something that works. So having Fast Forward come in, and they outsourced a provider to come into our house and work with our kids and provided a respite so my husband and I could actually go and have a date. So that was something that was really helpful. Had I wished it happened 10 years ago? Yes. So I feel like eventually we got to what we needed, yet we lived in kind of a state of crises and of, I would say, fear, because we were constantly, did we do enough? Did we do enough? Have we found the right thing? Do we need more? What is there? So constantly just feeling like we needed to do more. And once we felt like we were supported and we had the services we needed, then we could take a breath. And then again, like I said, being a squeaky wheel. I don't mind being a squeaky wheel, but I think sometimes I do come off as fairly aggressive when I am in a school meeting because I have my list of things, and over time I think really explaining to the school where we are as a family and the struggles that we are having, and being completely honest and being very vulnerable, and saying, hey, I need your help. I'm not an enemy. I don't want you to be the enemy. We need to work on these kids together, and you need to help me and I need to help you, has made our connections kind of with the school a little bit, have been better and not so stressful. So understanding that and really balancing my self-care. Like I'm in a career where I'm supposed to be telling everybody to balance their lives. And I was terrible at it. So, I think really having that breath and taking that moment, I needed people to help me do that, because I was so overwhelmed. My family was so overwhelmed. We were just living in a state of kind of fight, fright, or flight at all times, basically. So having people to help you make a phone call, help you fill out an application, do that research, that gives you time to then breathe. And I feel like every family and caregiver that is, whether they have one child who experiences disabilities or 10 that experience disabilities, you need help. You can't do it by yourself. So just really having those supports, I think is crucial. And to me, if I had, as soon as I found out my children as soon as I kind of went through this process of, even from a young age, and hearing a diagnosis and kind of going through that loss of, okay, what's my life going to be, and not knowing, and having a support system then, and having a community then, and having a support group, or knowing that you're not alone then, I think would have made my experience a lot different. So starting there and building those and then working on the services, I think would have been really helpful for me, and just feeling like I was a valued member of the school team and not having to fight so hard, I think would have made things. And then insurance, it's the difficulties with the insurance companies and what they'll pay and what they won't pay, and what provider they will cover and what they won't, and having to, and even providers not taking insurance. I think we're a lot of our struggles. So kind of understanding that and would have been helpful. I could speak on this for hours, but I just think that parents need a voice and they need to be understood, and they need help and support. So.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. And I'd like to wrap up with just asking you, if a parent who was just starting this journey came to you, what would you say would be the first thing that they should do?
First thing that they should do is find time in their day to rest and to find a support network, like I had just mentioned, and also to connect themselves with a tribe of people that have those resources that can get them started with, all right, you don't have to start researching alone. Here are some places you can start. And that's a good starting place. But I feel the need for having a community and having a support and having that respite built into your day is where people need to start. And then once you have those things, start tackling the advocacy part, because it's very easy to go 100% into advocacy because you love your children so much and you want everything for them that you forget about yourself. So, yes, connect. Connect and support.
That's great. Connect and support. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.